Welcome to my F1 channel. Welcome to Peter on Pole. My name is Peter, back in pole position. Drive to Survive Season 1, Episode 5, Trouble at the Top. In this episode, it's mainly all about Force India and McLaren, and not necessarily to do with the drivers as such, but more so to do with the people in charge. The owners, the team exec, the managing director, whichever name, whichever title. On Force India, we have Vijay Mallya, a very interesting character, somebody who is quite bubbly, quite flamboyant, is somebody who almost, can tell is like a fan of Formula One and somebody that's always wanted to get in there. And since he's had his money, now he created his own team. And yeah, you can sort of get that from his character. Very bubbly guy, very looks very easygoing, looks like he likes to party. He's called the King of Good Times. It was his nickname. So you got Vijay Mallya on one side, and then you got Eric Boullier of McLaren, who was formerly of, I think, Lotus Renault, was it? He is somebody who's a bit more, he's a bit more stressed. He's a bit more under pressure. He's somebody who doesn't quite take the media sort of too well. And yeah, so you got these kind of two contrasting situations. The comparison of these two teams is quite interesting. They're almost like mirroring in terms of the way Will Buxton puts it. Force India do a lot with so little, and yet McLaren do so little but have a lot. I mean, this is a prestigious team. McLaren have won series of titles, should be up there with the best, competing at the front foot, and haven't been doing so ever since really Lewis Hamilton left the McLaren team in 2013. There's a terrible race. I don't think they mentioned what race it was, but there was basically a rubbish race that took place where McLaren were not doing good at all. Boullier was facing serious pressure with the media, and he was asked, are you going to take full responsibility for this, and are you going to resign? And it was like, it's so strange. If somebody in the press says, are you going to resign because you're not doing a good job, basically, it's quite, anybody will be startled by that. But then Eric Boullier, of course, he was his reaction and his face, you could just see like, I want to kill this man right in front of me. At the same time, he's like sweating buckets. He's nervous. He's red-faced. It's crazy. And then, of course, literally the next week, Eric hands in his resignation, or Zak Brown puts it as, I've accepted his termination of his resignation, of his contract. He's straight on the phone to Fernando Alonso, and he's giving Alonso the update, which, Stoffel Van Dorn's there as well. But the issue with McLaren, and as this episode unfolds, is that Alonso is a big influence in that team. And that could probably cause a problem more than help the team. Yes, he's a two-time world champion. Yes, he's a phenomenal F1 driver, one of the best to ever done it. But when you let the drivers start running the team, this is where, when there's no boundaries, it gets very, very, very dodgy. There's a person in the McLaren team, I forget who it is, who mentions that, there was decisions that have been made in the past which are very difficult to reverse right now. And it kind of, you just knew that they're in a bit of a rut here. And keeping Alonso is probably the smartest thing to do, but then is it the best thing to do? It's it's very messy. The days of Ron Dennis and Eric Boullier. I mean, McLaren before, in 2016, from 14, 15, 16, 17, even now 18, it's just, they were just terrible. Absolutely. It's a shambolic mess. Yeah, it's just bad. So you get a changing of the guard. This time, Zak Brown now becomes the #1 leader of McLaren. He is the man where he says the buck stops at him. And of course, he has to drop the line. Being American, he drops the line, I'm here to make McLaren great again. I just thought, oh, come on, brother. Leave that to DT, man. So you get the sort of the bad things going on. You get the trouble going on at McLaren. And at Force India, it seems like it's not happening. So I was sort of waiting, okay, what's going on? Why is Force India in this episode, in this conversation? And of course, Vijay Mallya, there's a lot more going on with him than there is than what meets the eye. So he's from India, lived in India, and he had an airline company, Kingfisher, which collapsed, I think it was in 2013, and that accumulated £1 billion in debt. And then the Indian banks were saying, he hasn't been paying those taxes, he hasn't paid that 1 billion. And so there's an investigation going on with him. to the extent he moves to the UK in 2016 just so that he can get away from India, because it was intense the way he puts it. People were after him every single day, and it became too much. He looks at it as a forced exile. The way he portrays it, the way Netflix kind of get him in his montage, and he says, it's a forced exile. I do not agree with the charges against me. He also has this sort of saying on his desk where he says, I totally agree with myself, things like that. And you just wonder, like, does it say more about his character? Does it say, he could be an honest, genuine person. I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't know. But it's one of those where you felt like this is a man who will not lie down that easily. But then again, the charges against him are quite huge. 1 billion in debt. I mean, do you fight that case, Now we move on to the drivers. We get a bit of Ocon time, if you will. He talks about his upbringing. We go back to his place in France. He has like a little sports kind of little gym area. He's a very likable character. He's somebody who straight away, he gives you that impression of, because he's a young driver. You sort of kick off with him and kick off on a good foot, if that makes sense. He's somebody who loves to work hard. He in his gym area, he says, look, no girls, no drinks, no distractions, and he focuses. He says, from race one, I come here and I focus on doing the best for my body to get in the best shape to try and get the performance out of the car. He's a very ambitious kid. He talks about, I want to be world champion and I won't stop at anything less. He has a very humble upbringing. His dad his parents don't come from a lot of money. His dad is somebody who was a mechanic and literally worked tirelessly amount of hours to get him in. So Ocon is the type of driver who doesn't come from money. He comes from raw talent. So that's the two contrasting things you get in Formula One. You've got the money or you've got the skill. And Ocon comes from the skill side of things. And so, you sort of, you're rooting for him. I certainly was rooting for him as soon as I saw him in this episode. And of course, the year previous in 2017, he did so well. He actually shocked quite a lot of people as to how well he performed. And so Ocon in this time was somebody who was well respected in terms of, yep, here's another kid that's coming through that looks like he's going to be quite good, quite quick. So yeah, that was a very nice little piece they put together. I love the way Netflix go back to the person in question or the topic and go back to their roots and find out where they're from, and then you get a little bit of taste of the parents, the family, what kind of upbringing they've had and how they react. The dad is clearly a proud father of his son because he's in the big league right now, and him being a mechanic, I'm sure it was just one of his dreams to see his son do so well. And it's just nice I love seeing kids, young people who don't forget their history, who bring their parents with them, who, there's something about it, because you imagine when they were younger, or, 10, 20 years previous, where, they had no money, they were broke, and they just did what they could to make ends meet. And then you see the come up where now he's making, close, if he's not making the millions already, he's close. But he's definitely in the six-figure salaries. And, it just transforms a family. Like, it changes lives, I know money isn't the be-all and end-all, but at the same time, like, it does answer to a lot of things. Then there's this other piece, and this is what makes me, like, fall in love with the guy. He visualizes, he's got, like, a little, almost like a simulator type of thing, where he's got the steering wheel in his place. I guess it's his home. He's got steering wheel, he's got the pedals, he's got everything. And he sits, he's got the seat, everything like that. And he visualizes Silverstone track, and so he gets himself ready, and he just closes his eyes. And as he closes his eyes, Netflix panned to the onboard camera of him driving at Silverstone, and he starts saying, right, DRS turns on, right hand turn, 50 mile an hour, 10-yard distance, left, bring down the gear, and he's visualizing everything. You see his feet moving up and down for the brake and accelerator. There's just so many things, and yeah, he's got his eyes closed throughout the whole thing. But Netflix are panning back and forth to the onboard camera on the actual circuit, and it just, I was like, wow, it drew me in so much, and it just made me think. I love, like, his passion and his love for the sport, for the business. I absolutely love it. It's something that, I wish I was a Formula One driver, and I'd love to behave like that, totally engross myself in it. It was just a fantastic, phenomenal piece. Now Silverstone's getting its time to shine. Remember in Redemption we had the Monaco piece and it was lovely, glitz and glamour. And then Silverstone gets this undeniable respect from all teams, from people from different countries and everything else, because they know Silverstone is one of the most famous circuits as well. Zak puts it as the home of Formula One. The teams like McLaren and Force India, Aston Martin, now you have Red Bull. These are all teams that, maybe not Red Bull as such, but their factories there, but these are teams that are from the UK. So when it comes to Silverstone, it's the home race, if you will. And so there's a lot of respect, a lot of respect is put before, that race. It's a fast circuit. It requires skill. It's quick. It's a fair sort of circuit. You could either go all out. Ocon mentions that, I'm not going to lift the throttle. I'm going to go full pelt, because that is where you get the best time, of course. But then, if you can keep that car in place and keep the car sticking to the track, then it makes you even a more phenomenal F1 driver. Apologies, it's Fernando Alonso who says it's the home of F1. That Silverstone is the home of F1. This is Fernando Alonso, a very patriotic Spaniard. And yeah, so even for the likes of him, two-time world champion, for him to come out with something like that, you got to pay attention and you got to respect his opinion. And many fans in the UK that I speak to in terms of Formula One fans, they say their favourite circuit is Silverstone. And at first I just thought, it's just a bias to be, it's a bias because it's the home Grand Prix. But at the same time, when you go and look into the actual circuit, it's actually very good. Like Monaco can get its plaudits, but it's actually a terrible track, but it's got the status. That's what kind of wins people over. But Silverstone actually is actually a very good track, and it's a very skillful, very technical track, and it tests the mettle of a driver for sure. In the run-up to Silverstone, the Indian authorities begin seizing Vijay Mallya's assets, and now he faces a possible extradition. So in other words, just basically handing him over from India, they're handing him over to the UK to deal with basically his mess. And Vijay responds with a very telling line. Again, this guy's good for film, he's good for camera. He basically says, "I am the subject of one of the most political witch hunts in Indian history." I thought, my goodness, what a line. And now with Vijay, he can't leave the UK in fear of being arrested now. So Silverstone for him is actually, a godsend, because it's the only race he can attend throughout the whole year. And you think there's about, 18 to like maybe 22, 23 races in a typical Formula One season. He only gets to go to one. And now, because of course he fears now he could get nicked if he goes to an airport, and if they see his passport, he's quite a famous person. So, it won't take them long to put him and detain him. You get to qualify now on the Saturday. Tough day for McLaren. It's not going well. Stoffel Vandoorne is pushing the hell out of that car. He's really trying. He's really being aggressive. Caused a bit of damage to the floor of the car. Fernando Alonso is saying, look, this is just not good enough. The car's not well. On the contrary, Esteban Ocon is flying. He's doing brilliantly in qualifying. He's had a good qualifying session. And you get a lot of panning back and forth between McLaren and Force India, and you start to see the tail of one team on the way up and then one team on the way down. And it's just like, they sort of start to trade places, if you will. And it's just, it kind of brings you, when you look at seasons back in a scope, it makes the season more interesting, because at the time when you're living through it, you don't find it as crazy as it actually is. Like 2020 season, I mean, if that wasn't a crazy enough year. Netflix are going to do a documentary on last season, and my goodness, how intense that could be. But at the same time, I'm skeptical, because how much footage can you really get when we were in this pandemic? You can't really get close to people, and I just wonder how much content they'll have. Great footage of this. The debrief after qualifying with McLaren, it includes basically every technical person in McLaren, including the two drivers. Everyone's got headphones on and they're talking to each other in the same room. And it's footage you don't ever get to see. They're discussing what happened at qualifying. They're discussing what's happening with the car. How does the car feel? Vandoorne's giving some feedback. Alonso's giving some feedback. And it's just a part of it. Like I said, I love this kind of content. If I could hear and watch the content every single week of every single team, I would standardly do so. And, you know, you get that honesty and that rawness from the team. You know, one side of the team is saying, we're doing everything we can. We've done some setups. We've changed a few things. The drivers are like, there is no difference. The car doesn't feel any great. Alonso, with his experience, is saying, over the season, things get better. But in this case, things are getting worse. And we're halfway in the season. He was saying we're in July. Season starts in March, typically. We're in July. And I'm seeing no improvements. It's such a tense thing, but it flicks back and forth. I've just given you their whole thing in one go, but on the contrary, Force India are having a fan party, right? At the, and it might not be at the same time, but it's after qualifying nonetheless. And, Ocon's having a good time. Sergio Perez having a good time with the fans, answering questions, giving away prizes. And it will show the happiness of Force India, and it will flip to the sadness at McLaren, and it will go back and forth about 3 or 4 times. After each line that Van Dorn's not happy with, it goes to the happy scene of Force India, and then back to the Alonso line, and then back. It's just great directing from Netflix. It's great production there. It's just something that is so unique about this episode from the others. The others have done so well. They've been good episodes, but I think Netflix definitely felt like, we don't need to be repetitive. Let's keep things spicy. Let's move it up a little bit. Let's change a few things. And, people like me have clocked. We get to the race, and I was just sort of sitting there thinking, man, I'm trying to remember the title, Trouble at the Top. I'm trying to remember the title as I'm watching this. And it's crazy because, Force India on track are doing much better than McLaren. They're smashing them out the park. They've overtaken their place. Off the track, however, as bad as it's been for Zak Brown and McLaren, and, having to go through this tough time at the minute with a car that's underperforming, it's strictly sports, if you will. What's happening with Force India? You've got a situation where somebody is, we're talking about the level of tension, and what's it like to go through a case, or be hunted, if you will, and you're talking about billions of pounds in debt, and it's such a mess. It's such a mess, and yet you feel like, I would rather be in McLaren's position, if you will. If you're talking specifically the racing, of course, Force India, but with everything put together, because this has implications. What's happening with Vijay Mallya is not just Vijay Mallya's thing. Now he can't put any money really into Force India. Things are being seized, things are being frozen, there's things going on there. And Vijay makes a point where, I can't afford to bring a Fernando Alonso into Force India, but it's about a team. So he was talking about building a team rather than having one superstar. Sergio Perez and Ocon, 2 very competent drivers, very good drivers, very talented drivers at that. And then at McLaren, you've got the superstar, and then the up and coming, the young buck. So it kind of makes you feel like, wow, this is, Vijay had a good idea, had a good plan. I think if he could put the money in, he would nick an Alonso, a Sebastian Vettel, or you know what I mean. So it's just such a great conversation between these two. But yeah, you just sort of feel like this is going to cause more, like, Trouble at the Top still exists. It makes sense in this episode. And as they go through the race, I mean, there's a lot of things that happen at Silverstone, which is interesting, and it shows you how difficult that track is. There's a lot of crashes happening, a lot of people retired in the race. It's quite an impactful race. Silverstone is a good race to have. Let's keep it on the calendar, please. As the race pans on and carries on, obviously McLaren not having the greatest day. We get Ocon, who is holding off Fernando Alonso. He's doing better than his teammate Perez. He's doing better than the McLarens in general. And it's like the final lap, and again, as we're on the onboard camera of him finishing the race, the narration is of him going back to thinking about where he's come from. It's almost like, it's that sense of pride, and also that sense, that real emotion where you think, man, mom, dad, I've made it, but I'm making it, if that makes sense. And just the thought and process of, in the back of his mind, my mom and dad worked so hard for me to be here right now. And as he's finishing the race, you just get that warm feeling of, well done, Ocon. And the thing is, McLaren is the more popular team. It's the more favoured team, let's say, than a Force India. And the drivers of Force India didn't have a great, fan base, unless you were French, which where Ocon's from, or Mexican, where Perez is from. Outside of that, really, you didn't really get too much. You've got Vijay, who's Indian. Then you've got Otmar. I think he's Canadian or he's American. I can't remember. Please comment below if you know the country. Forgive me. But, you know, so there's different nationalities going on. There's different things going on in the Force India team, whereas McLaren, it's a bit more streamlined. It's a bit more straight in a weird way. It's a more popular side, a more popular team, rather. But yeah, just that clip of Ocon at the end, it was a perfect way to end the episode. Flashbacks of him, you know, visualizing the circuit again. The way Netflix have directed it again, have produced a brilliant piece of work here, where they've gone from him talking about his upbringing to him visualizing the track whilst we have him on track finishing the lap and him narrating on top. It's just a lovely piece put together, a great idea, fantastic producing, fantastic directing. And just as that's finished, we get a picture of Crofty and Vijay Mallya, David Croft, commentator for Sky Sports F1. We get him in a scene, and him and Vijay having a private conversation, or private, what it seems to be. And Crofty's asking, you know, are you going to stay? Rumors of you leaving. And he's like, why would you say that? Vijay's like, why would you say that? He says, no, I want you to stay. But it's good to let your team know because of the implications this could have on the members of staff. You know, mechanics in the garage who've worked their socks off for you don't know what's happening. And it was very like, wow. I was taken a bit by it. But of course you have to think of these things. But I hadn't thought of it at the time. And I thought, wow, that's really, like, the pressure's really on for Vijay. 3 weeks later, we then pan to Force India's sort of office, factory area. And you just see that all the members of staff are there. You see Otmar and this administrator with him. And he comes in to tell them, you know, Friday gone, Force India have gone into administration. And it's like, oh my days, you know. It's, you know, you're about to see possibly the ending of a Formula One team, a team that's going up, but because of personal things going on in the back with the owner, it crumbles. It absolutely fades away. And it's like, that's why they're no longer called Force India to this day. And it's a sad, sad situation because Force India is a team that everybody respected. It's a team that everybody grew to love. And to see it slip away, you know, to then become, you know, later on in time, it becomes Racing Point and now it's Aston Martin. It's, yeah, it's a sad end. It's a sad episode as a whole because of that story. It's sad to see McLaren not doing well unless you're not a McLaren fan. And it's sad and it's more so with the Force India team because the story, which looks so great, and when they started, they were doing so great, they were doing so well, they overachieved. And then this news hits, and it's like a bomb. It's the absolute bomb at the end of the season. Not even at the end of the season, but yeah, just in the end of the episode, rather. Yeah, it left me down. I felt down. And it's like, I need a lift up. I need something. But yes, that, ladies and gentlemen, was episode 5, Trouble at the Top. Let me know in the comments below whether you liked the video. Hit the like button if you do. Let me know your thoughts on the episode. Let's have some conversation. Let's have some dialogue. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Episode 6 coming out next. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, lights out.